We're parked in a van just behind one of Britain's most exclusive gentlemen's clubs. And in a few minutes' time, there's going to be a lunch with the Rwandan ambassador to the United Kingdom, the chairman and founder of an international public relations firm that's worked with the Rwandan government, and a Malaysian businessman. And how do we know that? Well, the Malaysian businessman is actually one of our undercover reporters.
For the past 3 months, Led by Donkeys has been investigating the government's plan to forcibly send asylum seekers to Rwanda, a cornerstone of the Prime Minister's Stop the Boats policy, and a dream of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream. That's my dream. It's
when
my
will
obsession.
that happen?
Suella Braverman has described Rwanda as one of the safest countries in the world.
Rwanda is one of the world's fastest growing economies, one of the world's safest countries, and has a proud track record of hosting and integrating refugees.
But our investigation will hear from a man who's helped run Rwanda's international public relations efforts, admitting that critics of the Rwandan President Paul Kagame are locked up, how other Rwandans have disappeared, and how the regime kidnapped a leading opposition figure.
There are worse kidnaps. It was quite an entertaining kidnap.
We see the country's former Justice Minister, now Rwanda's High Commissioner in London, dismiss an incident where several refugees in Rwanda were shot dead by police.
There is an incident in 2012 where the police shot 10 refugees. Yes, it might have happened, but so what?
We learned the ambassador is actually a critic of Britain's whole migrant policy.
What would you say to to the Prime Minister or to the Home Minister? What would you say to them?
Tell them that they are doing it absolutely wrong. They're doing it. They should have a long-term idea.
And we hear the ambassador denounce what he calls the LGBTQ drama in the UK and says he doesn't want to import it into Rwanda.
Also defining those rights and trying to be sure that the rights you are talking about are not LGBTQ, drama.
I'm Anthony Barnett, an investigative journalist who's been working with Led by Donkeys to examine the government's Rwanda plan. In June, we set up a fake Southeast Asian business and approached the British public relations firm Chelgate, who we knew had been working with the Rwandan regime. We emailed Chelgate and said we were interested in investing in Rwanda and wanted to appoint an advisor who was well connected and knew the East African country. We said we liked the pro-business environment in Rwanda. It didn't take long for Chelgate's executive chairman, Terence Saunders, to reply.
You're quite correct in understanding that Chelgate do have significant knowledge and experience relating to Rwanda, with our network of contacts including some of the President's most senior advisors.
A Zoom call was arranged for the following week. Supporters of the plan to deport refugees to Rwanda claim the scheme is vital to stop criminal gangs profiting from human trafficking and getting refugees to risk their lives crossing the channel. Instead, they say they will be sent to a safe country where they'll be welcomed. Critics claim it is cruel, costly and unethical to forcibly send asylum seekers against their will to a country that has a questionable human rights record. We wanted to try and discover what those with the inside track on Rwanda really thought.
It's very good meeting you, and where are you calling from? KL or?
Chelgate chairman Terence Saunders told us he did a lot of work for the Rwandan regime.
We've helped the Rwandan government with a lot of difficult situations. They're one of the few countries which it became a public awareness that we were working for them.
Saunders told us he'd worked for Shell when it faced hostile media after the execution of environmentalist and writer Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was protesting against the ecological damage caused by oil extraction in Nigeria. Saunders told us that in Rwanda, Chelgate has worked with President Kagame's official spokesperson and given media training to a lot of the regime's senior ministers and ambassadors. And he told us how Chelgate helped to organise a trip to Rwanda for British journalists, a trip Saunders admitted wasn't open to everybody.
I mean, we haven't organised a trip for any hostile critics out to Rwanda because we thought that might be playing into their hands. They would just be digging for negative stuff. So the people who've gone out have tended to be either enthusiasts or people who are open-minded.
Fane Saunders praised Rwanda for being one of the safest countries in Africa, where bribery was not an issue, but he admitted it still had its problems.
We coined a phrase, Rwanda works. And it does. It's totally different to other parts of Africa from that point of view. So I'm a big fan of Rwanda in many ways. Yes, it's not quite a dictatorship, but it's run with a very strong central government. I mean, Kagame is, so again, a bit like the early days, I suppose, of Singapore. And the Kagame was very tough. And similarly, Kagame, if he thinks, he encourages opposition. There are opposition members of parliament and so on. But if he thinks that somebody's trying to undermine it, yes, he is, and his people are rough because they are very on them.
Even though Fane Saunders has helped Rwanda promote a positive image, in private he admits a more brutal reality exists, including disappearances and kidnappings.
They are criticised by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and so on. There are things happen in Rwanda which bluntly are not good sometimes. Things happen, people have disappeared who have been captured. People who are critics can be locked up. He will take criticism, but if he feels it's criticism that's going to damage or undermine or is malicious, whatever, they do get locked up and they get released after a while. But and Amnesty International will criticise them.
In 2021, Chelgate became embroiled in a major international controversy when the Rwandan government was accused of unlawfully abducting Paul Rusesabagina, the man portrayed as a hero in the film Hotel Rwanda, who saved more than 1,000 lives in the 1994 genocidal war. After the war, Rusesabagina became a human rights activist and a critic of President Kagame's government. He became a Belgian citizen and moved to the US in 2005.
In August 2020, Rusesabagina was in Dubai and he boarded a flight that he believed was going to Burundi. But according to Fane Saunders, Rwandan intelligence arranged for the plane to stop in Kigali, the Rwandan capital, where Rusesabagina was arrested on charges of terrorism and after a trial jailed for 25 years. During the international storm caused by Rusesabagina's arrest, Fane Saunders helped coach Rwandan's then Justice Minister Johnston Busingye on how to deal with the media.
In our Zoom call, Fane Saunders said Rusesabagina was on his way to meet with a rebel group when he was abducted.
He thought he had chartered a plane. Well, he had chartered a plane, but the Rwandan intelligence services heard that he chartered this plane out to meet with this guerrilla group. And they arranged with the plane that it should stop over in Kigali on the way to where he was going. And he came out of the plane. He didn't quite realize where he was. So they said, "Welcome back to Kigali. Could you come this way, please?" It was quite funny with the definition of kidnap. I mean, I think probably technically it was a kidnap. The Rwandans deny it's kidnap. They say, well, he got off the plane. But yes, they did arrange that plane would stop in Rwanda, and he hadn't realized. Yeah, I mean, there are worse kidnaps. It was quite an entertaining kidnap.
In March 2022, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention reported that Rusesabagina had been illegally detained and sentenced after an unfair trial. They said Rusesabagina had been allegedly tortured and was targeted by the Rwandan regime because he was a human rights defender and for his criticism of the government on a broad range of human rights issues.
Our undercover reporter told Fane Saunders he was worried that the UK's plans to deport refugees to Rwanda might lead to optics that could damage his company. But throughout the call, Fane Saunders insisted that any asylum seekers that ended up in Rwanda would be looked after well and housed in good quality accommodation. Towards the end of the call, Fane Saunders told our fake businessman that if ever he was in London, he should meet with the Rwandan ambassador, whom he considered a friend.
I was going to say that if you're interested in Rwanda, I think that a person you should meet is the Rwandan ambassador in the UK, who I knew when he was in Rwanda, and he is. When we first had dealings with Rwanda, one of the people out there said to us that he was one of the 3 most likely successors to the president, and he's called Johnston Busingye.
Mr. Besigye has long been a key figure in the Rwandan regime during a period in which it's been criticised by the US State Department for significant human rights issues. Mr. Besigye was Rwanda's Minister for Justice before he became High Commissioner in London, and his appointment led to some British MPs calling for him to be subject to sanctions over the role he allegedly played in the controversial abduction and trial of Paul Rusesabagina, the opposition figure made famous in the film Hotel Rwanda. Mr. Besigye was in charge of Rwanda's prison and police services during the period when Rusesabagina alleges he was tortured and denied medical treatment. So we decided to arrange a pretend stopover in London and ask Fane Saunders if he could fix up a meeting with Mr. Besigye. The next day we had our answer, and lunch was booked with the ambassador at an exclusive gentlemen's club in central London.
Our fake businessman met the ambassador and Fane Saunders in mid-August here at the Travellers Club, and we switched on our secret camera.
Over a long lunch, the ambassador stressed how the country had stamped out corruption and was an excellent place for investment. He told our fake businessman how refugees would be welcomed in Rwanda, provided with good housing, employment opportunities and free to move around. The ambassador said he was expecting up to 5,000 asylum seekers from Britain and said Rwanda already had a track record of assimilating refugees.
Since the year 2000, maybe 99, 97, 98, we have been open and we have received probably more than 300,000-400,000 refugees from the region, from DRC, from Burundi, especially from DRC and from Burundi. They have been coming, and we have never closed our doors to anybody who wants to come in. Now, the UK already know that even if nobody comes, we are fine. They are already talking to other countries, and whether it works in the end and whether it doesn't work is really none of our concerns.
But over the course of the lunch, Mr. Besigye made a number of comments that will alarm critics of the UK government's Rwanda plan. The ambassador was dismissive of an incident where Rwandan police shot and killed a number of refugees. Although several people died, Mr. Besigye didn't appear too concerned.
Ministers have come to Rwanda, they have taken BBC and everybody, they have seen what's going on the ground, but when they get here, they say, wow, there is an incident in 2012 where the police shot 10 refugees. Yes, it might have happened, but so what? Here in the UK, someone is shot every day, and it is on BBC and it is everywhere, but they haven't said the UK shoots people. That's not what we have said. No, we did our prosecutions of the people, we did the investigation, what happened, and so on and so forth. It could have been a mistake. So that is what the media will want to turn Rwanda into.
Led by donkeys could find no record of a shooting in 2012. But in 2018, when Mr. Besigye was Justice Minister, 12 Congolese refugees were shot and killed by Rwandan police after a protest over food rations. Although there was an investigation, Amnesty says nobody was charged with the killings and some of the leaders of the refugee protest were jailed. In a ruling the British government is now appealing, the UK Court of Appeal said the Rwanda plan was unlawful, as there is a real risk that refugees could be sent back to their home country. When asked about this, the ambassador said such an event was unlikely, but he did not rule it out completely.
I mean, why would it happen? Even if it happened, in the unlikely event that it happened, how many times would it happen? Under broad daylight, in broad daylight? We had a double British and Rwandan supervisory committee, very independent, appointed by the British government, appointed by the Rwandan government. How would that happen and even consistently happen? Secondly, what would be the interest?
When Mr. Besigye was appointed High Commissioner in London, the Lantos Foundation, a prominent human rights body in the US, claimed Mr. Besigye played a significant role in grave human rights violations in relation to the extraordinary rendition and kidnapping of opposition figure Paul Rusesabagina. They said at the time Mr. Besigye served as Rwanda's Minister of Justice, the agency which oversaw Rusesabagina's capture, imprisonment and subsequent sham trial. Our fake businessman asked the ambassador about Rusesabagina.
In the end, it became a very unfortunate situation. The man was able to mobilize and start up a political thing, and start up a rebel army and position it in place, and they attacked Rwanda and killed people, and one thing led to another until he was arrested and tried.
Rusesabagina's supporters strongly refute the claims of the regime. The ambassador denied Rusesabagina was kidnapped, but described how he was arrested.
The flight had a stopover in Kigali, welcomed by our intelligence, our criminal investigation department, criminal intelligence and investigation department, and
the look on his face must have been just...
And they told him, you are in Rwanda. And he's like, no, I can't be in Rwanda. He said, what?
Rusesabagina was jailed for 25 years after what Mr Bashingi and Fane Saunders claim was a fair trial. In March, Rusesabagina was released from prison after President Kagame pardoned him, and he flew back to the US. The ambassador showed no regret about how Rusesabagina was captured and even suggested the regime would do it again.
But what's to keep him from doing this again with the...
Pardon me?
With full credibility.
Like with the to get another rebel army, or can he do it again? Or
well, I don't know. Maybe, but his plane would again land in Kigali.
The lunch guests moved to another room to have coffee, and the ambassador was asked what he would say to the British Prime Minister or Home Secretary about its migrant policy.
So what would you, in this case, what would you tell the UK what to do in terms of this whole migrant policy? What would you say to to the Prime Minister or to the Home Minister? What would you say to them?
I would tell them that they are doing it absolutely wrong. They're doing it, they should have a long-term idea. They should have a long-term policy of making it a choice for people not to risk their lives coming to the UK. Because right now, many people are not coming here because of war in their countries. No, they're coming here because they are hopeless. They're coming here because they have no future. The future is absolutely insecure.
The lunch came to an end, and the ambassador offered our fake businessman a lift back in his official car. Whilst the radio played, he was asked about the Home Office run by Suella Braverman.
Let me ask you this. What do you think of the Home Ministry here?
Pardon me?
What do you think of the Home Ministry here? Braverman.
You want me to tell you what I think?
Yes.
You won't tell it to anybody? They could do better. I think they could do better.
Despite his country being a key partner in the British government's flagship immigration policy, the ambassador went on to launch an attack on the UK's image of itself as a compassionate country. He was asked, why did Rwanda agree to help the British with their refugee plan? Was it a business deal?
It's not a business deal. It's a totally a different matter. We don't, you see, when people come here,
Yeah.
let me put it the other way. We are not a very proud lot to see people in 2023 still willing to die in order to come here. And even if we are not doing anything else, we would still be opposed to it. We would still say it's indecent, it's immoral, that there is someone in any part of the world still willing to die to come here. And it's still as immoral for this country to still see themselves as the refuge country, the solace country, the protection country, the compassion country. They enslaved millions of people for 400 years. They destroyed India. They destroyed China. So they destroyed Africa. So compassion is politics. I sit here and watch it. Compassion in this country is politics. There's no compassion here.
Unprompted, the ambassador went on to make comments that will concern those critics of the Rwandan plan who fear how LGBTQ refugees might be treated. Although homosexuality is not illegal in Rwanda, changing gender is, and campaign groups have criticised the country for its ill treatment of LGBTQ people.
This whole thing you see here, look at the LGBTQ drama.
Yes.
Why are we dramatizing?
What are we doing with that? Yes, yes.
Why are we dramatizing it? Beyond, there's now a bigger problem, bigger than COVID, bigger than underdevelopment.
Yes. Yes.
Why? Yes, there could be, there are scientifically people who are like that.
Yes.
It's not fueled. It's not fueled by here. The debate right now is bizarre. They go to schools of young children, underage classrooms, underage classes, 10, 13, 12 years old. And they are busy telling them how this whole male and female gender is a lie.
Yes.
Doesn't exist. You can be anything. The future is in knowledge, is in science and technology, is in medicine and health, is in education, is in environmental protection, is in respect of people, dignity, people's dignity, fairness, making sure what you are dealing with others is fair. You are not waiting to exploit people, prospecting people's rights, and also defining those rights and trying to be sure that the rights you are talking about are not LGBTQ, drama. Let's keep in touch.
Okay, wonderful. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon. Thank you for the drive. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Ministers hope the government's Rwanda plan could be the centrepiece of its campaign in the coming general election. In a matter of days, the Supreme Court will hear the government's appeal after the plan had been judged illegal. We will soon find out if Suella Braverman will achieve her dream.
In a statement to Led by Donkeys, Chelgate's chairman, Terence Fain-Saunders, said,
Chelgate does not represent the Rwandan government in any capacity, nor did we do so when this meeting took place. I do not speak on the Rwanda government's behalf, and any comments I made in the course of the lunch meeting to which you refer were made informally and in a wholly private capacity. There is no public interest in informal comments. I have no further comment to make.
In a statement to Led by Donkeys, the High Commissioner, Mr. Basungi, said, Mr. Fain-Saunders' comments carry no weight and should be disregarded. Mr. Basungi said the 2018 shooting of refugees was a tragedy and an isolated incident that was fully investigated and that lessons have been learned. He said no one will be forced to return to their country of origin. Mr. Basungi said Paul Rusesabagina was legally brought to Rwanda. On the UK's migrant policy, he said, there is nothing compassionate about allowing the current situation where countless people are paying criminal human smugglers and dying while making dangerous journeys across the Channel. He said, everyone, including LGBTQ people, will feel safe and valued in Rwanda, and added that he's proud to work alongside the Home Secretary.